Hello, and welcome to my presentation on the Eightfold Path of Skill, also known as the Noble Eightfold Path. I don't often hear it referred to as the Eightfold Path of Skill, but the first time I did, I it resonated with me because every aspect of this Eightfold Path it is a skill. And when we live a skillful life according to these formulations, these precepts, then it results in awakening, basically. Uh, First, it helps us to live a better life, a more skillful life, but it helps us to awaken consciousness. It's very practical kind of teaching. And just to give a little insight into it, the focus is this Eightfold Path. But this is something that the Buddha figured out, that it came to him upon his awakening when he understood the nature of suffering. And so the Eightfold Path begins uh, as a part of what's called the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth being that there is suffering, or that there is dukkha. Dukkha is this Pali word, dukkha. And so du is bad, and ka is fit. And it's interesting that we look at this word and it's been translated, for our Western understanding to be suffering. Whereas in Pali, or maybe even in the original Sanskrit, what the original word was, it referred to rather dis-ease, whereas the opposite sukha is ease. And so we see it dukkha, bad fit, or bad empty, as in like the empty axle hole of a wheel, like the wheel of samsara, right? That this wheel of samsara exists to kind of describe this world that we live in, this this world of phenomena. And what does that mean? The world of effect. That effects are playing out through these causes that pre-exist, that precede the effects. And it keeps unfolding and unfolding and unfolding due to these causes that precede the effects. And so what the Eightfold Path allows us to do is to precede the causes. The causes which are not in this manifested world. They precede the manifested world, but they're perpetuated by our actions. But before they're perpetuated by our actions, they're perpetuated by our emotions. And before they're perpetuated by our emotions, they're perpetuated by our thoughts. And before that, the thoughts, all these are perpetuated by this cause, which oftentimes is the effect of a previous effect. And this perpetuates the cycles that we live in. And the Buddha saw this. And he saw that dukkha, the cause of it, we're these three things that we fit into this empty axle hole of this wheel of phenomena. And these three things are delusion, often related as ignorance, but delusion, craving or attachment, rather, depending on how you look at it, or what word you want to use, and aversion, or which is often referred to as hatred, which I think is kind of an extreme word for this phenomenon. That hatred is just a degree, a greater degree of aversion. What are we averse to? Are we averse to spiders? Are we averse to snakes? But hatred, right? So these three things are what keep the wheel of samsara sort of going, and it's a bad fit for us, this empty axle hole. And so if we were to ride on a wooden cart that was pulled by an ox with wooden wheels and the wooden axle, if the axle didn't fit well in the wheel, we would experience dukkha, dukkha, dukkha. It would not be an ease of it would not be a ride of ease. It would not be an easy ride. We would be dis-easy riders. And so this is dukkha, the thing that does not allow us to experience ease when we go through life. And it's from delusion, attachment, and aversion. And so what are delusion, attachment, and aversion? These are things that we experience in the mind, right? Because the Buddha says that suffering or dukkha is not necessary in life. This is something that we add to it. This is the thing, this is the spice that we add to our life, that when we don't like something and we're like, oh, and we suffer through it, we make it worse. Now, if we could just look at it realistically and say, hey, look, if I just get through this, it'll be better. Or that this thing that I'm suffering through that's hurting me, when I overcome it, I'm going to be more skillful. That I will have learned something. I will have become a more resilient person. So that's a transformation that can happen when we have sort of the right attitude, right perspective. And now I'm starting to get into the other parts of the Eightfold Path while I'm still on the Noble Truth. So, first Noble Truth, there is dukkha. The second Noble Truth, which I covered already, is that dukkha is due to attachment through delusion, attachment, and aversion, which is just the other side of the coin from attachment, but the same phenomenon. Third Noble Truth, that there is an end to suffering, to dukkha. Fourth Noble Truth is that the way to end dukkha, the way to end suffering, is through the Eightfold Path. Voila, the Four Noble Truths. And so, as I said, upon his experience of awakening under the Bodhi tree, the Buddha understood this, that the truth just revealed itself to him. And that's what happens when we're able to let go of the delusion, to let go of the attachments, when the attachments aren't directing our actions, and when our aversions aren't directing our actions, we're able to see the reality. And the more we try to do this, the better we get at it. The more we know, the more we have this upright view, which is the first and foremost part of the Eightfold Path, the part that we probably have the least under control, but is the most important, the upright view. And so oftentimes you'll hear it referred to as right view, right view. Well, that's the correct view. And whatever is incorrect or whatever is not correct is incorrect. It's wrong. But right and wrong are part of this dichotomy that has nothing to do with objective truth. See, right and wrong, I feel, and they're fine to use in the beginning. It's fine. Okay, well, this is right, this is wrong. We should know right from wrong. Don't do this, don't do that. But that can only get you so far. Because if we keep looking at things as right and wrong, good and bad, these are perspectives from within relativity. And the Eightfold Path did not occur to Buddha out of concepts of relativity. It came from having this objective consciousness. And so we tried to develop this objective consciousness with the understanding that we're going to have to divest from our ways of thinking, our ways of looking at things, our ways of responding to things. And that really the only way to have this perspective is through this living path of compassion. And we'll get to what compassion truly means, right? It gives us direction. In it, the word compass that gives us direction, tells us what's north, what's south, what's east, what's west, right? Compassion. And so in order to have it, we have to stop judging people by their actions. And we look inside of ourselves and say, hey, that could be me, right? In fact, that was me. That was me. But what happened? Through the experience of grace, we can come to see the truth. And it takes a conscious shock in order to see something that is objectively true and not tainted by our attachments and our aversions and our delusions. And see, I think I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but we're going to go through the different parts of the Eightfold Path here, and in their Pali terms as well. Samadhithi, upright view. So sama, upright, right, equilibrium, or I like to see it after looking at all these different meanings and what each of these things mean from a more uh objective perspective that I would like to think is this position of greatest potential. Upright. We're upright. It's not just right. Upright. It's objective. This person is upright. They're standing upright. They're not lying down. It's a position. Sama sankappa, upright resolve. Samavaka, upright speech. Sama kamanta, upright action. Sama ajiva, upright livelihood. And these last three here are within the sort of the division of ethical conduct, whereas the first two, upright view and upright resolve, were of the wisdom. And then the last three of the discipline, oftentimes referred to as mindfulness or meditation or samadhi. Samavayama, upright effort. Samasati, upright mindfulness. Sama samadhi, upright concentration. I like to refer to these as discipline because mindfulness is the first aspect of concentration. Concentration precedes meditation and meditation precedes samadhi. And so samadhi is just a degree of concentration. And all of these are degrees of concentration. And it begins with effort, goes to mindfulness, and then concentration, samadhi, meditation. All these words are virtually interchangeable, but you can sort of put them in order of degree as well. Uh, so it can be confusing in that way. So upright view. So ditthi. I was looking at different ways of understanding that term. So it can be seen as view. It can be seen as understanding. It can be seen as sight, vision. It can be seen as imagination. And imagination really is the exact same thing as clairvoyance. Clairvoyance and imagination are the same phenomenon. But oftentimes when we use clairvoyance, it's someone who sees, right? But how clear is this imagination, right? Is it entrapped by delusion? Is it entrapped by attachment, craving? Is it attached to aversion? And so with the upright view, it's understanding the true nature of things. And in order to do that, to truly do that, the true nature, we have to be ready to let go of everything we think we already know. Anything that wasn't received in a revelation. It's just something that we've only heard, something we haven't experienced. It's only intellectual knowledge. And there's nothing wrong with intellectual knowledge, but we have to convert that to wisdom. We have to convert that to experiential knowledge. And so we understand the true nature of things. We understand the nature of the Four Noble Truths, that resonates with us. And when we understand the Four Noble Truths, we'll understand the law of karma, of cause and effect. And then we can see the impermanence of everything within this realm of phenomena, within samsara, within this relativity, that all things are subject to the law of entropy. That as there is day, there is night. Everything that rises will descend, will fall. And part of that is that it gets to eventually start back over again. And so we talk about all the many levels of impermanence, of rise and fall, of day and night. That this is, we are in this world of dichotomy where that happens. But in order to escape from this wheel of samsara, we have to understand the true nature, that everything in this life is impermanent. So what we put our value in, are we just wasting our time as this eternal essence that goes from lifetime to lifetime, going through the same thing over and over again, recapitulating the previous life, just as we recapitulate the previous day? When we go to work and we hate somebody, we hated them yesterday, we hated them the day before that. When's that going to end? When are we going to let go of that? And what's going to happen when we do? Things will change. Things will become better. We won't suffer as much. And we'll be able to see a little bit more of the reality behind what was keeping that going. And then we can understand the interconnectedness of all phenomena. And so, the earth, this physical world is a closed system, and everything is interdependent upon everything else. And it goes this way for the law of karma as well. That, like, we affect each other. That, there's nothing that happens in this world that we are not connected to. There's nothing evil happening in this world that we are not responsible for. It's like, what? And oftentimes, what we see as unjust punishments was something that we helped to bring about upon ourselves. And when we understand that, then we can have compassion for each other. We can have compassion for the murderer. It's like we look at a figure like Jesus, or figure like the Dalai Lama, these figures of compassion, right? Of great compassion. It's like, how can they have this? It's just, it makes no sense to us. But it does make sense because they have a cosmic consciousness. And when you have the understanding of how everything works, you have so much more compassion, so much more of an ability to tolerate what you would previously think was intolerable. And not that you should tolerate evil or tolerate murder, but that you can have a little pity for the perpetrator, that his actions or her actions came from ignorance, came from delusion. Delusion. What Samael and Veor may call negative clairvoyance, right? This wrong view that drove us to these wrong actions. He says that all murder is caused by negative clairvoyance, by wrong view, a misinterpretation of the reality. And that is a great suffering. And, we can probably talk more about that in some other topic or class. But moving on, upright view, Four Noble Truths. Okay, I already kind of covered it, but here it is. The nature of suffering, dukkha. Ordinary life is inclined towards suffering in every aspect. Suffering is due to clinging, attachment, also delusion. There's a way to end suffering. The end to suffering is through the Eightfold Path. How bold, how amazing. Law of karma, action and consequence. So, karma, it literally means action. And if we looked at the Pali term, so karma is the Sanskrit term, and Pali is derived from Sanskrit, is a later term. And uh, it's really interesting about language and the way we study language in Gnosis, that everything came from a golden language, right? This golden language, which lives on through symbols. And so we have the Kabbalah to kind of help us with these symbols, which have numerical values as well. Uh, but in the beginning, in earlier in this humanity, we had a golden language where everything you said was what it meant. And it wasn't necessarily spoken so much as experienced, as seen through the language of symbols, this golden language. But eventually, humankind, through entropy, through the law of entropy, degraded, devolved. And first thing to go was probably language. First thing was action, then language with it. So, speech and action at one point were completely unified as the same thing. But eventually, as that degraded, as humankind degraded, speech and action started to lose their equivalents and became two separate things, which is the reason why we have the written word now, because our word used to be the bond, but now things need to be written down. And ever since, the event that's symbolized as the fall of the Tower of Babel, uh, we have trouble even understanding each other because of the way that we choose to use words, the way we choose to use our word. Our word is no longer congruent with our action. So therefore it loses meaning. And so Buddha, when he says he refers to action, he means volitional action, or what we would call will. Will. I will do this. I will not do this. Or I will this to happen. Volitional action. Intentional action. And he says the three doors of action are body, which is acting, doing, speech, and mind. And so we can look at these as three different dimensions of action here. Body is that of doing, this physical action. Speech precedes the doing. It can also it can also go along with the doing, but since the separation of speech and action, speech now somewhat precedes doing. You can say you're going to do something but not do it, or you can say you're going to do something, change your mind. It's like you're entirely, you know, change your mind if you need to. It's one of the actually one of the bravest things you can do in a lot of cases. Uh, could be the opposite as well, but if we're willing to change our mind about a lot of things, we can change the world. Oh yeah, and the mind, of course, is precedes speech, right? And so first we start with the body. We The way we choose to act, even if we said we were going to do something else, but we choose to do the right thing instead. That's wonderful. And then speech, like maybe there's things that we shouldn't say that we say, and we can apologize later, or we can say something nasty and then not do the thing that we said we were going to do, and that's great. But then we can start to say, oh, you can keep that thought from becoming speech, and that is a level better. But then when you can keep the thought from occurring in the first place through right view, then you have compassion for someone who has just insulted you because they thought you did something. In that moment, you could see the ignorance of the action, and you can have compassion for that person. And when they see that it doesn't have like this effect that they thought it would have, they will know that's like, oh, then maybe I had the wrong idea. Because that is cause and effect. That when we follow insult with insult, it it only it only makes things worse, actually. It's like, oh, okay, well, I can see why you said that because you thought I was doing this, but I can understand, this reaction. You know, we start to learn to not be as reactive, and then when we have a little bit more compassion, then we can keep negative thoughts from occurring, and not that all things like all thoughts that would appear negative aren't necessarily negative in general, but that is it if it's true, especially if it's something true, but it doesn't affect us. It doesn't affect us. And so let's see, what do I have next? Upright view. Okay, still in upright view here. Very important aspect, the most important. 10 courses of unwholesome action. Destroying life. That's wanton killing, right? You don't want to kill for no reason. You want to avoid killing in general, but you're not trying to get killed yourself. And, you know, so you don't want to wantonly destroy life. Taking what is not given. And that's that's just like part of like the golden rule. You don't want anything stolen from you. Don't take what's not yours, and you won't be stealing. Uh or you won't draw a kind of envy towards you taking what is not given. Sexual misconduct. And so, there were the rules for sexual misconduct are a kind of sexual conduct that avoids lustful impressions, right? That there's an upright sexuality. And the rules given by the Buddha, which I'll just go ahead and give because that's what he gave, that's what the Buddha said, is that sexual misconduct, well, I guess for nuns and monks, for most of them, it was like, it's like you guys are chaste, or you don't have sex, and that's what they agreed to. That's what's commonly understood, and I think for some it's different. Like it's different for the lamas, right? But I won't get into that now. But for the householder, let's say, which is what most of us are, which we all are, unless we go off into some monastery or something. We're all householders. We're all supposed to be householders. Uh, Sexual misconduct is anal sex, is oral sex, is digital sex. Uh, so like the digits of the hands and feet, right? Those are digits. So the digital sex. Uh, False speech. Yeah, you don't want to false speech, slanderous speech, harsh speech, idle chatter. So these are all parts of speech here. These these courses of unwholesome action, which will be covered later in upright speech. And then covetousness, ill will, and wrong view. Wrong view. That's the beginning of like an unwholesome action is wrong view always. Okay, so moving on, upright view, impermanence. All things in life are fleeting. Nothing is permanent. And so what is permanent though? What is permanent? The soul or the essence, right? That at our most fundamental being in this world of samsara, of phenomena, we are an essence distilled from what we would call the being. So this is our true self that is beyond our level of manifestation. It's where we proceed from this this sacred individuality that is an aspect of the unknowable God. And so we are this eternal essence going from life to life. Recapitulating this. But what we're doing here is we need to rebuild this bridge between us and the being. That bridge is the soul. So that is permanent. The worries that we have today are similar to the worries we had in the previous lives, but if we think back to those previous lives and how important we must have thought like certain things were, how important are they to us now? They're completely meaningless. No context to it. Because none of it was important. And so what is important is what has its center of gravity within eternity. And when we awaken consciousness, we'll be able to reopen the past memories. We'll be we'll be able to access our purpose here. Our being as an aspect of the unknowable God has a job, has a mission. And it has nothing to do with what it is that we may think is important here in phenomena, where nothing is permanent. But at the same time, everything's connected. As we exist inside the universe, the whole universe also exists inside each one of us. And not just each one of us as people, as what we think of as humans, but also in animals. The universe exists inside each of them because each one of them has a similar thing to an essence that we call an elemental. Same thing with every plant and every mineral. Each has an elemental, which is what we were before we joined the human kingdom. That through what's referred to as, which is true spiritual evolution of a mineral, where the elemental or what precedes an essence, it's practically the same thing, except that the essence in a human being is subject to karma now, whereas the elementals are not subject to karma. That they are going through their own mysteries within their kingdom. So the mineral mysteries, where an essence or an elemental learns to be the most basic thing, right? Which eventually in a human is like is where we learn to have this skeletal system as a foundation for the body. So the mineral mysteries are very important to us as humans, and that is the basis of a lot of our physical existence. And then through the plant realm, uh, learn the transfer of fluids, the converting sunlight into food. This is how we get our vitamin D. Is the same process that plants get their photosynthesis, and then the mysteries of the animal kingdom, right? To have it's a more complex bodily system, but just about as complex as the humans. But what the human has now is an intellect. And for us, in our fallen state, the intellect is something that often gets in the way. It's useful. It's useful for sorting things out in relativity, within relativity, but it's not useful for getting at the objective truth. And as part of this interconnectedness of all things, everything we need is already inside of us. And this is also like a very very strong teaching within Hermeticism, as above, so below. And separateness is actually an illusion. So all this, like, and so I say within relativity, within space and time, all these things seem very real, right? It's real. It's real within this dimension, within this physical world. It's real. But what's in the superior planes is even more real. The perspective of conventional science, of modern conventional science, is that like everything is rising from the physical, right? That we have consciousness because we got this brain and we got this nervous system. All these nerves and connections are interconnected, and this is what formed a consciousness. Is That's not how it happened. That consciousness precedes the physical form. And so the physical form is a manifestation from energy. And so consciousness is an energy, and everything really is an energy. That when we look at physical matter, it's just contained energy. It's energy in formation. Information. It's all information. And so when we stop looking at the physical world for the answers to the eternal truths, we're going to start getting somewhere. I remember listening to this I don't know, it was a conversation with this famous scientist who I won't name, talking about like the like how fast they go in Star Trek, right? That's like it's possible to go that fast because if you get a message to return to base and you go at the speeds they go, they'll get there before the message was sent. And it's like no, 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 no. You cannot move so fast that you get there before the thing that led you to be there happened. That's not how causality works. It's like dividing a distance. Like if you keep, no matter how fast you go, you will never get there before you left. Speed is relative, but causality is objective and it's not necessarily bound by time and space. And it's not that you can't travel in time. I'm not saying that. But 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 anything relative is inconsequential to that. No matter how fast you go, you're not going to travel in time that way. You will travel in time by traveling in time. That things, that causality can be instantaneous. And so it makes sense within the calculations within relativity, but not but that is not a greater law than objectivity. that all of these dimensions that we experience here are the inferior ones. In the superior dimensions, space and time, they're just beyond space and time. That eternity contains space and time within it. And so you can access space and time. You can no, I mean, you can access eternity, but you're not going to do it by looking into the past. You're not going to do it by planning for the future. You only access eternity in the here and now. Within now is the eternal now. Yeah, I hope that made sense. Upright resolve. Now, finally, upright resolve. We're on to something else. Cultivating wholesome and ethical intentions. Sama Sankappa. So we break down Sankappa. San, a connection with the highest truth, or to become one with. Kappa, or in Sanskrit, what's called kalpa. It's interesting what it means. It's got different meanings. It's like a kappa or a kalpa is a vow. It is a measurement of time. Vow, time, but it could also mean proper, fit, competent, sacred precept. So we look at these meanings, and understanding sort of like the degradation of language that it causes words to mean something else. And so when we follow this sort of trajectory, we can sort of get at the original meaning or seeing what it seemed to mean and why it means something in this time while it means something else in this time. So a vow. And it's time. And so a kalpa is actually a specific measurement of time. And oh gosh, I forget how long it is, but a mahakalpa is 311 trillion 40 billion years. So that's a great kalpa. Uh, and so when you think of what a vow is supposed to be like forever, right? And so a kalpa, it becomes a measurement of time. That's like, oh, this is a vow past that, this is how long a vow lasts. And so, yeah, so it's a sacred precept as well, a vow, because we take a vow. We like the vow of like this. Maybe I'm calling something, but the three jewels, right? Where we take refuge in the three jewels of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So the Buddha being the teacher, right? The one who's bringing you the teaching that is liberating you. Take refuge in that. You take refuge in the dharma, the duty, the work of awakening this consciousness and sacrificing for humanity. Take refuge in that. And you take refuge in the sangha, the community that you do this with. It's sacred. And that's what that made me think of, and I have no other connection. And so the three primary defilements, and that's what we find at the center of the wheel of samsara, inside that axle hole, the ill-fitting axle. Ignorance, delusion, kind of the same thing. It's just different ways of defining the original term, which I don't remember what that was. And then hatred, aversion, right? So delusion, craving, aversion is what I prefer, rather than ignorance, greed, and hatred. You know, greed is just I feel like that's just a degree of craving, and hatred is a degree of aversion. So it's just looking at it in its most extreme ways. It's like, oh, I'm not greedy, I'm not avaricious, so I have no craving. So that's not, yeah. We all crave, we all have aversions, and we all have delusions. We have to remember that at all times. And so the answer to these three primary defilements, to ignorance, delusion, is renunciation. We're not right all the time. We could be wrong. Or, it's like, if we are right and someone else is wrong, you're not going to change their mind, or maybe you won't be able to, or maybe you could. If you could, then you don't need to renounce at that point. But by the time it gets to a point to where you've said what you said and the other person said what they said, then you can just renounce and be, okay, well, we can agree to disagree, or we can do what you want. It's your life. And you I hope you can see the light based on what I may have said or done. uh but it's like, we're all responsible for our own paths. We're not responsible for that of any other. And the way we answer our own greed, our own craving, is through goodwill. Goodwill. You know, you wish well for others, even if they didn't wish well for you. You see that, through their own ignorance, that they're doing this, or that they believe this, or whatever. But if they really take a good look, they will see. And so we wish goodwill. We wish for people to understand their delusions. It's the same way we wish that for ourselves. Always wishing that for ourselves and others. And then, so the answer to hatred and aversion is a term that was put as harmlessness, but I think is better as compassion, because I don't find harmlessness necessarily as a virtue, but compassion is. I heard it said rather well from a famous psychologist that harmlessness means that there's nothing to you. You don't want to be harmless. You want to be dangerous, but with compassion, right? That there's no in harmlessness, there is no power to your self-control, right? That there's no vigor to it. There's no will. So will requires strength, virility, which is the root of virtue. I mean, the same root as virtue. Virtue, vir, virility, vir, and that does not translate to harmlessness. But at the same time, we do not want to harm. So I feel like harmlessness is just a mistranslation, a fundamental mistranslation. On to upright speech, impeccability in word. And so we covered already the roots of or the what precedes unwholesome action, and unwholesome speech is part of that. So false speech, slanderous speech, harsh speech, idle chatter, idle chatter. Uh-oh. Okay, so let's look at these answers here. Yeah, false speech. It's rooted in delusion, craving, and aversion. We speak falsely when we're speaking from our attachments, right? When we're speaking from our desires, like we're putting like a little bit of a bias onto things, right? So we want to learn to speak without bias. And it's up to us to figure out where that line is, because it is a very fine line that we're always whittling away at, to get to where we need to be with that. Because the fact of the matter is that it's very fine work, that we don't go into this work with hatchets and hammers. Slanderous speech, speech that is meant to sow enmity and division. So it's like, wouldn't slanderous speech be false speech? No, not necessarily. Because slanderous speech, a lot of the ways we use the term slander is that it has to be false speech, right? In like a court of law, you slandered me, because it basically said the speech was false. But the Buddha says that slanderous speech is speech that is meant to sow enmity and division. So it could be true, but what are you doing with it, right? That you could correct the person, I suppose, or you could talk about the person behind their backs, about what they did, what they said to others, so that they would like to create some kind of division there, instead of trying to help the person. We're sowing enmity and division against them, so that they have a harder time. Because why? Because we think they deserve it. We've become this arbiter of justice, which most of us are not. Harsh speech. So harsh speech is meant to inflict pain upon the recipient, and I have the different types numbered below it. There, the first type is abusive speech. The second is insult, and the third is sarcasm. Sarcasm is really such an insidious thing, and what we value it so much. It seems like if you spend a lot of time in the past 30 years watching TV, uh, you know, checking stuff out on the internet, we love the sarcastic stuff. And why is that? What is sarcasm? Sarcasm is accustomed to, like, stabbing. It's like you're like stabbing somebody without stabbing them. And there's nothing positive to gain from it, but we find it what what in us like finds that so titillating. And then let's see, and then okay, there we go. Idle chatter is pointless talk, speech that lacks purpose or depth. Such speech communicates nothing of value, but only stirs up the defilements in one's own mind and in others. The defilements. So the defilements are things that arise within us that defile us, basically. So this is due to delusion, craving, aversion. Uh, but they bring us into an egoic state, the state, you know, of what in Buddhism they call the psychic aggregates, what we call ego and gnosis. So they stir up the defilements. So like gossip would be a kind of a thing, or like pointless. What is it? Conjecture. Speaking about. I don't know why the word's escaping me, but yeah, along those lines of pointless conjecture that lacks any facts. Uh, yeah, want to avoid that. You want to speak in a way that is true, kind, and necessary. Right? Yeah, that's what the Buddha said. The three gates. Was it three gates? I might have that in here later. So upright action now. We're moving along quicker ever since we got out of upright view. Action, conduct. Kamanta. Sama kamanta, which translates to, interestingly enough, business work. And that's interesting because, let's see here. What just happened? Huh. Uh-oh. I was trying to jump ahead, so I don't remember the poly term. Ah, yes, yes. Because the next thing is upright livelihood, right? And so, but samakamanta, upright action, is like business work. Interesting. It's business work, and the next thing is upright livelihood. Then why was upright action business work? Because, and we'll get into this a little bit later when we get into the next part, but this is the work. This is the business, right? That this skillful life we're trying to live. Now we're trying to enact that. That this is the important business. And the other thing's just your livelihood. Right? So, skillful action emphasizes ethical conduct and the importance of leading a life that is aligned with moral principles. This means refraining from harmful actions, including killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and so on, which we covered in the unwholesome karma, unwholesome action. Again, action meaning karma here in Pali. Is kama or kamanta. Forward. So abstaining from destroying life, abstaining from taking what is not given, and abstaining from sexual misconduct. So were the top three things of the unwholesome action. And now, yeah. So we already covered those. So let's move forward. The upright action is a result of upright view and upright resolve. So when we have upright view and upright resolve, it results in upright action. And one thing I forgot to cover, we're going to go back here, that through this path here, uh, upright view, upright effort, and upright mindfulness are what's going to carry us through. These are the first three things we observe in terms of mastering the Eightfold Path skill. Okay, maybe I should have gotten to that later, but back to where we were. Yeah, upright livelihood. In Pali, sama ajiva, upright living. But well, it's interesting here too. In Sanskrit, you know, jiva, in Pali means upright means living, right? But in Sanskrit, jiva means soul, and jiva means soulless. So in terms of livelihood, it's something that we do that is not as concerned with the soul, I guess you could say. It's like, how do we get to that? Where kamanta, business, work, is upright action, and upright living is something soulless, a good soulless, an upright soulless. Yeah. And so, we want to earn a living in a way that does not harm others, right? So, in the Gnostic understanding, living in alignment with spiritual values, avoiding exploitation and attachment. And so we ensure that our work does not cause harm and serves as a means of fulfilling one's duty, divine duty, and choosing work that serves the greater good and avoids negative karmic consequences the best we can. You know, we got to get by. Especially in this time where it's it's difficult to have a non-exploitative uh, sort of living. Yeah, because the way you look at it, can look at it in any way, right? If you work in a retail store and like the clothing manufacturer, right? They're taking advantage of a third world country, perhaps. So perhaps taking advantage of people there, or we do the best we can. It's very difficult to earn a perfect livelihood, and so yeah, we avoid ones with the most peril. And so, according to Buddha, these are just 5 businesses you should avoid. So he didn't say don't, absolutely not, but you should avoid them. And that being weapons, living beings, such as like human trafficking. It says meat for intoxicants, 5 poison. And so, you know, yeah, avoid being an arms dealer, right? But if someone comes attacking, you're probably gonna need a weapon, right? Depending, depending, and unless it's justice coming to serve you, uh, then it's like we can trust other people, but tie your camel. That's what Muhammad said, right? Yeah, trust other people, but tie your camel, right? Don't be stupid, right? That there are some things there are harsh realities in life that need to be addressed in some ways, but avoid selling weapons. Not that everybody who sells weapons is some kind of degenerate, but Buddha says best to avoid. But they can be best friend in a certain situation. Uh, living beings, and that there really is no good aspect to this. I think just like human trafficking or anything like that. But meat. Now it's interesting. Now a lot of people see this and they say, "Oh, I got to be a vegetarian." And it's like, but no, you don't. Uh, in fact, the Buddha was not saying be vegetarian. The Buddha ate meat himself. The Dalai Lama eats meat. Uh, so the Buddha, he ate whatever people gave him, right? And in fact, he happened to be poisoned through some tainted pork, actually. Uh, but we in Gnosis, we avoid pork. And I don't know, maybe I don't think that's the reason why. There's other reasons, and you'll come to know that yourself if you ever tested that precept. But uh, but it's interesting. We look at these people who tend to be vegetarians, like in the Hindu religion, like the Brahmin caste, right? This is a priestly caste. They're mostly vegetarian, but they do eat meat on occasion, and that is like the meat of an animal sacrifice. They'll eat. And if we go to uh, the Old Testament of the Bible, we look at like who the butchers were, and the butchers were the priests. That because butchering meat, killing animals can be a very harsh impression, and perhaps it takes someone of like a more of a moral integrity to be able to do that without falling into a defilement. without defilements building up. And maybe it's the same thing with weapons too. The weapons, who made the weapons was Hephaestus, right? He was a god, right? He made the best weapons, the weapons of the heroes. And so in the Old Testament, in order for the people to sort of to cleanse themselves of their sins, of their defilements, it would require an animal sacrifice. Uh, and so if it was like one for something they've done, then they wouldn't be allowed to take the meat home, right? But the priest would have their share of that meat. Uh, but if they were giving like a friendship offering to God, then they bring it over. The priest, he drains the blood, splashes it on the altar, takes the fat of the organs, burns that to God. God gets all the fat, and then the priest butchers it up, takes what goes to the priesthood, and the rest is taken home for the family to eat. And so and so meat is a priesthood and not a business. It's in a way that we give thanks because it is a very nourishing food. And so avoid being in the business of that unless your name is Cohen, which means priest. In fact, it reminds me of Leonard Cohen. Actually, my favorite Cohen, Leonard Cohen, uh, musician, poet. He had this song, and I feel like Leonard Cohen was a kind of prophet in some ways, like one that a prophet that didn't want to be a prophet a lot of the time, but kind of came to accept it late in life. But earlier in his career, in his recording career, he recorded the song called "The Butcher," and the lyrics go, the song begins, and it's like this blues riff comes in. I came upon a butcher. He was slaughtering a lamb. I accused him then with his tortured lamb. He said, "Listen to me, child. I am what I am, or I am that I am." Like what God said that his name was, what to tell the Hebrew people his name was. I am that I am. Listen to me, child. I am what I am, and you are my only son. And so the butcher is his being. His butcher is the priest. And being that he's a Cohen, he's descended from that line of the priesthood. So I find that very interesting. And so, of course, we want to stay away from selling intoxicants. We don't need intoxicants. We don't need poison. So avoid those businesses. Unless you have a particular calling. Okay, so wrong livelihood if the following occurs: fraud, flattery, like a salesperson, right? Coming in, flattering you, trying to butter you up for a sale. Uh, three, insinuating. In parentheses, soothsaying. So I think it was a thing back in the day when certain monks would insinuate certain things, that they would do things for some money, like for a donation. Be like, oh, I could read your fortune. I can tell you what's happening in your aura because I could see it, uh, or insinuating that, oh, you would love some of that, some really good food over there, particularly sumptuous. uh you couldn't hint at wanting certain, like, particular things. um Dissembling, belittling, jugglery, trickery. So it's like this is like something that may happen in maybe haggling, like, oh, that's not anything. Just you try to be fair with your trades, right? Fair trade. And rapacity for gain upon gain. So that gain upon gain. So that's usury. But it's an excessive usury, let's say. That it's okay to loan money and get a little bit of interest, but uh, but not to rob someone. You want to be fair. You want to be fair with lending. Okay, let's see. Upright effort. Okay, so this is part of that triad, right? That upright view, upright effort, upright mindfulness. Sama vayama, endeavor, discipline. So oftentimes it's called upright endeavor. Sometimes it's called upright discipline. But I like effort. I also like endeavor. I like them both. So the four great endeavors: abandoning unwholesome states of mind that have already arisen, preventing unwholesome states that have yet to arise, sustaining wholesome states that have already arisen, developing wholesome states that have yet to arise. So these are the four great endeavors to always try to be in a wholesome state. Abandon the unwholesome ones when they arise, preventing the unwholesome states from arising so you don't have to deal with it. Uh, that's like the best thing, and abandon them if you haven't prevented it. Then sustaining the wholesome ones and developing new wholesome states. That's that's the way to do it. That's the way to move forward, and that's why it's so important. Upright effort. You got to give that upright effort. And upright mindfulness, samasati. Now, I like this term, sati, because sat. It reminds me of one of the, was it the niyamas or the, no, yamas, niyamas. Satya was one of those among the eight limbs of yoga. The first two being uh, yamas, the what people say are the do's, and then niyamas, do nots, or is it the other way around? But satya, it is truthfulness in. But here, sati, upright mindfulness, sati. So sat is truth, that which is unchanging. Sat, what is unchanging. So we need to be fully aware and in the present moment, self-remembering, right? So that's what mindfulness is what we in Gnosis call self-remembering. Self-remembering the being, remembering the being. So self-remember, observe the mind, the body, and the emotions in non-judgmental awareness. So non-judgmental awareness, right? We're not judging ourselves for the defilements in our minds because those are not us, right? They arise and they're there, and that's just objective. And we're not going to get anywhere faster by judging ourselves over it. We just need to observe it and comprehend. We comprehend, we eliminate. Comprehend again, eliminate. Little by little, uh, it's gone. As long as we can remain in non judgmental awareness. And that's part of compassion. We want to be compassionate to our essence. We don't want to be self compassionate to the ego, but we want to be compassionate for our being, for our path, and the path of others. So upright mindfulness, we're aware in the present moment, observing the actions of our mind, observing the judgments that are happening, going, whoa, 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 hold on there. This person is suffering. And we observe our body, what's happening in the body, right? If we're in love, we've got butterflies in the stomach and we don't know how to act. that'll probably be harder to kind of overcome, but we observe them what's happening in the mind, observe what's happening in the body, and observe what's happening in our emotions. It's like, oh, that stung. I want to strike back with some sarcasm, but we just kind of gotta sort of take it, let it go. That's not me. And there is a little bit of exhilaration in the letting go of that which wants to be attached to. And you can feel that in the moment when you're letting it go. When with the right mindfulness, the correct one. Let's see. Upright concentration, or sama samadhi, oftentimes referred to as upright samadhi. Upright samadhi. Going from mindfulness to single pointed concentration and deeper states of absorption, right? All these deeper states of absorption. So concentration, single pointed concentration is where that kind of begins. We start with the breath. We start with the breath, and that helps create separation from the mind. The mind and the consciousness are two different things. All right. So we find that separation, and then we bring the mind to a single point, and then we go to 0 point concentration, which is the state that we call meditation. Or in the 8 limbs of yoga is called dhyana, where single pointed concentration is dharana. We go to dhyana. And then deeper than that is the state referred to as samadhi, which when you look up samadhi, it means the same thing as samadhi. So it's samadhi, samadhi, samadhi. So upright view, which is from the perspective of the being. So we go from single pointed concentration to 0 pointed concentration to the concentration within the being. And let's see, I think that's it. Oh, let's see. Let's get back to here. Yeah, so that is the Eightfold Path, and I hope I didn't leave anything out. And but thank you. And if you have any questions, please contact us. What is it? Mainosis@gmail.com.